what is coming around the corner that's going to start, dare I say, eating your lunch? What's going to start replacing your solutions that are in the market at the moment? You have to assume the vision, but don't take those assumptions as facts. Don't fall into the assumption trap. Don't assume you know everything. So you make assumptions, test them, and that's where you learn to fail fast. If we solve this problem, what would be the impact of that? And sometimes you can solve a problem which has a massive impact on your audience that can help you grow. We often think of innovation as the big ideas which everyone knows. In the other form is just taking an existing product that you've built, and you can think of new ways to solve problems.
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I'm the managing partner at Epiphany Business Consulting and your host for today. I am so delighted to have you in the studio. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell so you can be notified every time we drop a new episode. Now let's get it started. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I'm going to be your host. In the studio today, we have Kingsley Maunder. How are you today, sir?
I'm great, thank you. And yourself, Rick?
I'm doing fantastic. It's Thursday afternoon. I do my podcast on Thursday, and it's a good day. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. You know, I have to tell you, like innovation, the process and the creativity is like one of my favorite things to talk about. And when I did my MBA, I actually focused on innovation and entrepreneurship. So we, learned the processes and everything, and it just gave me so much energy. So I'm excited to have you here, and let's talk about that topic.
Brilliant. Sounds like we'll have a good conversation then.
Absolutely. Do us a favor. Can you tell us who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do?
Yeah, I am the author of The SALT Test, How to Take an Innovative Product from Idea to Scale. I've worked in multiple startups, having a few of myself. So 2 of those startups have gone on to exit. A third one raised $180 million. I've built products from scratch that have been used by some of the biggest brands, Disney, EA Sports, Meta, many of those. But, with all that success, there have been multiple challenges, lots and lots of challenges. And those are where you've learned the lessons. And I took those lessons and I put them into a book, and I wrote the book that I wish I'd had when I'd started on my innovation and founder journey. And that is pretty much what I've put onto paper for people to learn from. If I can just help a few people make their lives easier, if I can help them build products more successfully, then I feel I've done a service.
Amazing. How does one get to have that as a career? It's one, entrepreneurs, we come up with ideas all the time, but this is how you earned your living. This is how you had your overnight success after.
Yeah, in many ways, really interesting. I think when I look back as a child, I was always looking to solve problems, and even some interesting problems which you wouldn't think about. And it's only then later on in life you find yourself in a situation. And I came out in the .com eras when I sort of started. I had a degree in computer science. I was quite fortunate to have move into that space just as the .com era was arriving. So I found myself within that opportunity and a huge excitement, particularly for startup founders, particularly for digital innovation. I very quickly moved into mobile technology. So it was a combination of having that opportunity with the right background is how I ended up in innovation at that time.
Wow. How fun. I do want to ask that question of, and you kind of alluded to it, but I mean, why? What drives you? What is that thing inside you that makes you want to solve the world's problems this way, if you will?
It's a form of creativity, I think. It
Mm-hmm.
is a form of creativity, and we all have, I believe, different ways of creativity. And for me, this is one of my ways of creativity. And I will often see a problem or a challenge, and you think everybody's the same as you, but we're all different in many ways. And you kind of think, oh, everyone thinks the same way as me, but I will see something and I'll think of a way of trying to solve that problem. And that sort of, that excites me, and I really enjoy that. Now, I work with a lot of people who think like me as well. And it's just it's something I enjoy, and it comes naturally to me.
When you think of innovation, I've had a number of different conversations and ideas or thoughts about what does innovation mean to you? How would you define it?
Innovation is coming back to, I think it's finding new ways to solve problems. I feel it. And sometimes innovation can come in different forms. We often think of innovation as that the big ideas, which everyone knows, those are the ones that are out in the world and say, wow, that's such an innovative, creative idea. And we can all think of those. Those are the people that we all know, the big innovators. Then in the other form is just taking an existing product that you've built, and you can think of new ways to solve problems, and that's innovation as well. So there's the big ideas, there's the step-by-step type of innovation, or in some ways, transformational innovation. So there's iterative innovation where you improve an existing product, or
Yeah.
transformational where you've got a product in the world, but it's starting to hit decline. You're not having the same growth, and hence you need to innovate within your business. I would say not necessarily the product, innovate within your business to come up with a new product to satisfy the growth of your business. And I think many of us can think of some of the examples where some businesses have launched with a successful product and then they have extended into new areas. Dare I say, sort of Amazon is a good example. They were first to market really with online book sales, or one of the first successful ones, but now they're what you would call the everything store. And they extended from just online sales to providing additional services around the world.
A lot of times when I think about innovation, I think about finding ways to create advantage. As you said, it could be business transformation, it could be product, it could be going after new markets. How does that jive with you? Is that an important part of it, like creating that advantage, or is it? You talked about products going into decline. Is that how does that all mesh together for you?
Absolutely. If we go back to product and this, I truly feel that the success of a product will depend very much on solving a problem for your target markets, making sure you get the right problem, but also having something which is different to what's currently in the market. And that's what you're alluding to around innovation. Absolutely. You need a differentiator. If you think about it, if I came up with a solution that was very similar to something else, it's very hard to get someone to change my behavior. As human beings, we are pretty lazy. We don't
Yeah.
really change behavior unless there's a real drive to change that behavior. And that is where the innovation can come in. I have a solution. I'm using an existing product, and that product solves a current need. But if there's still something that I'm still having issues with it, and I think we can think of a lot of products which we use, we quite like, but it doesn't, we still have pain points with those. And one thing could be, as a new company could come along and take my business, and that's where a lot of startups do really well, in that they can come in, they can innovate faster, they can move faster, and they can start to take some of the business from the older incumbents because they can't move as quickly as far as the innovation is concerned. That's really pretty exciting space. The other one is those incumbents then also need to innovate themselves to ensure that they keep their users and their customers. And that's sort of the iterative innovation I was talking about. So the startups are often the ones with their big innovative ideas. The incumbents, the more stable businesses, need to come up with innovative, iterative ideas to keep you interested.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I love that. One of the things that you said, a couple of things that jumped out to me, but one was solving a problem that your target market has. You see a lot of times, I've probably done it myself a dozen times, is where it's like I create a product because it was really cool, and then try to figure out who to buy it from. How do you make that match? If you're, especially, looking at a startup. I've never seen a startup where they started or where they were aiming was where they ended, especially with target market.
In the book, I talk about, I go through different stages. And the first stage of this, first I'll talk about why I've got the stages or the phases. And I think, we talk about innovation, and innovation is exciting, but it still has a process. If you want it to work, I still feel you should follow a process. And the start of that process really is understanding your target market and understanding what problems they've got.
Mm-hmm.
or challenges or pain points. And that is the starting point, because no matter how good your product is, as you said, I'm sure you've come up with some amazing ideas. No matter how good they are, they're not going to sell if you don't solve a problem or a challenge for somebody enough for them to want to purchase or use your product. So that is where you focus your efforts initially, because if you can get that right, then you need to focus on, who am I competing against? What are the current solutions? What are they currently using? And sometimes it's something like Excel or WhatsApp that's commonly used, could be sort of competitor. And then we go into the phase of, why is mine different? So, what problem are you solving? For who? How do they currently solve that problem? And then why is mine different? And that's where the innovation comes in. But it starts off with that point that you mentioned, the problem.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I've I guess that the other part of that conversation is solving that problem for the market that the market didn't realize it had. I spoke to someone the other day and we were talking about this, and he was talking about, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. He was talking about the idea that we don't have to educate consumers anymore. So we can create product for our target market, but we don't have to go through such great lengths to teach them how to use the product. What are your thoughts on that?
I think if you times are changing rapidly, as we know, through AI. But if you're solving a future problem, we call that bleeding edge. And the reason I think the reason we call it bleeding edge is because you've got to bleed a lot until you get to the point where the market catches up with your idea. And I've made that mistake before. I've been on bleeding edge projects, and you just have to stick around. If you truly believe that this is the way it's going to go, you stick around and you push ahead. Now, one of the biggest challenges of being bleeding edge, or also first to market, as you alluded to, is you've got to also be the first one to educate the market. They say that early bird catches the worm, but it's the second mouse that gets the cheese. And I believe in that, because the first one comes in, they've got to spend a fortune educating the market and teaching the market about this new product, about what it solves. And often someone comes in behind, and they just ride off the coattails and can, and take advantage of that in many ways. So I think there's a balance between the two. You could spend a fortune, you could be first to market, which is amazing, but also you're in for the long haul. You know it's going to be expensive. It's going to be costly. Now, in the modern world, it is cheaper than it used to be to educate your market, but it's still expensive and it's still timely in many ways.
Yeah, yeah. That whole crossing the chasm idea, we've got, our early adopters and all that good stuff. Is there in your book, do you talk about like specific strategies when we're thinking in terms of launching a new product? I guess I'm jumping to the end of the story, right? It just jumped out to me when we were talking about educating consumers. But do you have specific strategies that you talk about in terms of moving from, those folks that are, our early adopters to, our, I forget what they called it.
Yeah, it is. And I think the early adopters are amazing, because they will give you the evidence that this is something that people want. And the early adopters will be the ones who will test what you've got. And I have a strong theme around assumptions. And when we start up with an idea, we have to have a lot of assumptions about who's going to use it, what problem am I solving, and how am I going to sell it? I'm going slightly off track here from what you asked, but I don't want to go to the end of the story. And, and those early adopters will be the ones who will help you test those assumptions, because they're the ones that have a real need for your product, and they are open to using new products, and they're open to paying for them in many cases. They will give you the feedback. And as you get that feedback, you get more confidence that this product will work for this target market, and you'll get your messaging right. And not only that, you will also better understand what channels you can use to target this market. And so the early adopters, I think, are just a small section of your much bigger market. And I think what's also really helpful in many cases is when you launch a product, try solve what we call the minimum viable problem. Try solve the biggest problem for your target market first. Try not to tackle too much. And that just helps you focus your efforts, because particularly if you're a startup founder, you usually don't have much funding. Just focus all that effort into solving the biggest problem instead of trying to spread yourself too thin. I think we often try to, spread our bets, if I can put it that way, across different ideas, but really put your effort into one. You'll find that niche market. When you know you hit that traction, there's always a lot of people who are similar who you can then expand to with the confidence that they will accept your messaging, that you've got the right channel, you're solving the right problem, and you have the right solution for them.
Okay. So where we start off is we have our target market. We understand a problem, a challenge that they are experiencing. We're doing a little bit of research, competitive analysis, just trying to understand what else is in the market that they're currently using. And we discover that we have an opportunity to create an idea, create a product or business transformation or whatever that's going to be. And we're going to develop a minimum viable product. Am I skipping any steps here?
No, that's all good. Yeah, yes, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have our minimum viable product. What's going to be our next step? How are we going to, I guess, you said we're going to solve the biggest problem and we're going to kind of push that out to market. What does that look like? Because we already know it's not necessarily going to have all the bells and whistles. It may not be, shiny and fun. How do we get what we need is probably the best way to ask that question out of the MVP.
So once you got it into the hands of users, then it's you're in such a fortunate position in that you can get the feedback from them. And not only that, you get the analytics. There are lots of tools out there that allow you to see how they're using your product and the feedback. And you can use those, you can create what we call a customer advisory board. And yes, okay, I love this product. It really works. However, I also need, I'd also love to have this feature, or I have this problem. And can you sort of solve this problem within your product? And you will get lots and lots of those. And then you're in a fortunate position in that you can then look at those and prioritize which ones you're going to solve next. And that is where you can then start getting onto the momentum of solving problems and just making your product better and better by working with your customers and users and going through that method.
That makes sense. One of the things that kind of dawned on me, one of the things that we talked about was looking at the overall development cost, of your MVP and being able to implement it, and looking from the perspective of I'm actually doing it right now with the product I'm working on. It's like, what is that? What is that ROI, and how long is it going to take to get it? Where does that fit into this overall equation?
What's really interesting is when I initially wrote the book, or I felt there was anywhere between 3 to 9 months. I would say sort of 3 to 6 months. However, with the rapid changes recently, that could be now down to weeks, in some cases, possibly even days, where you can get a prototype up and running into hands of people. And there are tools nowadays whereby you can get into the hands of your target market really quickly to get an understanding of what they think about. And maybe this is alluding to what you were saying earlier. There are tools nowadays which will help you find the right people who you can engage with to get some feedback straight away. So nowadays, I would say you can probably even get a prototype up and running within a week and getting feedback from people, which is incredible. And that's thanks to AI.
Yeah. It dawns on me that we can be like, very hyper focused on that target market as well. So we can get, we can be very, very specific about who we're trying to get the product in front of, and get the best feedback on that. One of the things you talk about in the book is knowing when to back off, or perhaps even, go a different direction with your product. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in metrics, because the metrics shouldn't lie unless you want them to. So I think in that case,
That never happens ever.
And the way you can stop that is before you launch anything, is you have to define your metrics. And you have to say, well, this is what success looks like. And often we do that. We say, this is what success looks like. And we know that if we hit this, we've done well. But in addition to that, you also have to have a metric of this is what failure looks like. And there has to be a red line. If you go below that line, you need to stop. And that's really important because often we push on ahead and we go below what would have been that failure line, and we keep pushing and we keep pushing, and we're not getting the evidence that there is success here.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's much better to, particularly now, to change direction. And because, as you said earlier, because you focused on that niche, because you focused on the single problem, the effort to change is much easier nowadays. You haven't put the same effort that you had in before. If you've done something for 9 months, you find it isn't working, that's a really hard shift. And when I launched my first product, it took nearly a year to get into markets and across 600 stores. It was amazing, but it really didn't hit the numbers. And therefore, it's really hard to make a shift. Whereas nowadays, if you do that focus, rapid iteration and movement, it's much easier to shift to something that's more successful, potentially more successful.
How do you know? So we talked about, kind of that bottom line. So we're talking about cost wise, we're talking about timeline wise. I imagine for our metrics, is that right? Is there anything else?
Your metrics will depend very much on what your goal is at the time. And I wouldn't necessarily say this early days, wouldn't necessarily say cost or money. I would say, I would look at the traditional funnel.
Mm-hmm.
And where in that funnel do you want? And the first thing is, how far can you get people down your funnel? And if you're just starting, yes, you can pay to get people in with these new services, or you can just do some quick Google advertising or any advertising, LinkedIn or whatever, suitable for your target market. Is business to business, probably LinkedIn or whatever, whichever method it is, you'll probably get them in. And you'll then want to see what proportion is getting down the funnel. And it might just be signups. It might be launch this single page and all I want is to tell the story. And can I get enough emails? If you want to sign up for early adoption, submit your email. And you might say, I need 5 email addresses from 100 people to give me evidence that this works. And so it might be something quite simple as that. It will depend on the product. It doesn't have to be money, particularly as early days. But somebody's giving you something and it's an email address. We don't give away our email addresses that easily.
Yeah.
To give you evidence that it will work.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about, I guess, starting at the top of the funnel. I think the thing that makes me nervous, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, is the messaging. So if the messaging is off, it kind of skews your ability to get those email addresses. I mean, obviously, there's just so many factors. Do we have the right target market? Do we have the right message? Do we have the right channels, et cetera, et cetera? Is there a way to, I don't know, make that work for you or make it more likely?
I think, as I said, there's that success line, the green line, and there's the failure line, the red one.
Yeah.
And if you haven't got your messaging quite right, you'll probably be somewhere above the red line, but not up to the green line. And that's when you can start iterating with the messaging on that side or the channel that you're using. So I think that's where you'll start to say, okay, yeah, I'm okay. I haven't hit success, but I can iterate with the type of messaging I'm using. Is that more successful? Or, can I iterate with the channel I'm using? I think unless your message is horrendous, and if you've got the right target market, if you're solving the right problem, that all comes back down to almost day one. Your messaging comes from your target market, your problem you're solving. And if you can attract your audience, or if you can get that message across, you should be able to attract your audience. And you could just then fine tune that.
Okay. That makes sense. How do you know when to, well, I guess my question originally started off with, we've got our MVP out there. We're, getting people into our pipeline. How do you know when to make that decision, whether you should, just sandbag it, say, hey, this is going to work versus going left. Use the idea of Amazon. Amazon was losing like, billions of dollars a year when it first kicked off. It looked like an abysmal failure, but look at it now.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can quote Jeff Bezos, and I might be misquoting it in some sort of way, he's stubborn on the vision, but he's flexible on the details. And
Hmm.
he truly believed in his vision. There was no doubt about it. And it turns out he was correct, and he's correct in many ways. So he knew where it was going. And so he pushed ahead with that. And we mentioned the bleeding edge, and obviously he needed lots of funding and finance for that and got that. And that's
Right.
how he then managed to run at a loss until they reached that vision. But until they got there, they were flexible on those details, or flexible on how they got there. They were, as you say, you fail fast and win relentlessly, which is the title here. That's exactly what he did. He had that vision, and there were failures along the way, but he iterated, he moved, he just kept pushing towards that vision and moving forward. So as long as you have some evidence of success, you can keep moving forward in that right direction. The fear is when you don't have any, that you keep pushing ahead. But counter to that as well, often we are impatient, particularly when we're younger, for success. We think success should come in 12 months, 18 months, even 3 years.
Yeah.
But, and that's more likely to happen with AI. But with Jeff Bezos, he says it's sort of 5 years is when a product really succeeds for it to become a global scale. And I've seen that across the markets, that we expect these massive global success stories within a couple of years, because those are the stories that we all know. But in reality, global success does take a while, and it takes a lot of pain, but you just keep, be relentless on that and just keep pushing towards that goal and believe in that vision and keep working towards it.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the other side of that is failure. It's like you've got this vision and you decide that, or suddenly you learn that, the target market, it's for the target market, it's perfect for them, but they have no interest in it whatsoever. There's, especially as younger people, as you mentioned, I mean, we get really tied to our ideas. We get really tied to, whatever that vision is. How do we manage that?
I think it comes down to the clues again. It's all about those clues. What clues are you getting that'll help you see whether if you really aren't achieving any success at all? And if you're
I
not
mean, like
getting,
on the emotional side, we
how do
have
you
this
handle that on the
emotional
emotional
tie
front?
to our ideas. Sorry about that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've been down that path, and it's really tough. It's very, very tough. But and I alluded to that story. And it was sort of 3 years and took a year to build a product. However, if you do things more rapidly, more iteratively, you don't have the same emotional feeling to the product that you would, which has taken you a year to build. I've spent my entire savings building this product. You, I would therefore, that's why I encourage people to take these steps, because you can work out really early on whether
Mhm.
this is the right product for the right people and if this is the right solution. Because if you've got the right target market, you're solving the right problem for them, you've got something that makes you different, your product is much more likely to succeed than anybody else. And that's why I recommend you start with that, because don't start with a solution, then trying to sell it and spend ages doing that. It's
Yeah.
called innovator's bias.
Yes.
And then you have that heartache when you know it doesn't work. You could work that out really quickly. And that's sort of coming back to the title of this is fail fast, because you don't have that emotional connection that you would if you hadn't failed fast.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I love about the metric side of things. And you're just looking at the numbers and saying, "Hey, this works or this doesn't work." And it's easier to make an objective decision that way. I really appreciate that. So we talked about the idea of making those iterative changes. So we've got our MVP out. We've got market acceptance. People are beginning to give us feedback. I've got a software company I'm working with, and they're there. They've got their product out there. People are saying, "Hey, this is a great thing," and there's 100,000 things that people are saying, hey, it would make XYZ better. How do you figure out what to do next? What the most important things to do are going to be?
I'm a big fan of prioritization, because now they need to prioritize what they've got to
Hmm.
build next. And the first thing I ask is, what's the impact of this? And what is the impact of this change? If we solve this problem, what will be the impact of that? And sometimes you can solve a problem which 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 has a massive impact on your audience. It can help you grow. And if that's what you're looking to do, then that's important. Or it may help you maintain clients or ensure they don't move away. So you've got to look at what that impact is.
Yeah.
And then you balance it off against the effort required to solve that problem, to build it or develop it, and how confident you are. Really nice, what we call ICE methodology for prioritization. There are lots of approaches to prioritization, but that's probably one of the simplest and most effective approaches to prioritization. How much impact will it have if you solve this problem? How confident are you that you can solve it? And how much effort is required to solve it? Because the more effort it takes, you should really think about whether you should attempt to solve it or not.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. You mentioned one of the other things you mentioned earlier was it's the second mouse that gets the cheese. I was thinking about that from the perspective of specifically like software development. So you've got one, you launch a product, you got a competitor that comes after that, and they do something that's a little bit different. How do you feel about? Is it more important to kind of chase the market, keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, or to continue to do your own thing, innovate, and try to increase that differentiation, if you will?
It's a great question. There are certain features that come out whereby if a competitor comes out with it, it then becomes the standard and it becomes an expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And if it becomes an expectation, then you'll need to build it. Just because your competitor has it doesn't mean you have to build it. But if it becomes an expectation that people in your space have it, you need to build it. And so that is the only time I would say you should chase your competitors. And I use that word, chase competitors, in a way that it then becomes table stakes. Because then people would not use your product because it doesn't have this feature.
Okay.
Apart from that, I would continue just to go in my own path, talk to my clients, my users, and see what they need and continue to push ahead with my own direction and, getting that feedback and pushing it out. And in some ways, yes, you do need to know what's happening in the market, because maybe you could jump ahead of them as well. As you said, they've said, okay, here it is. Here's the table stakes. And then you could say, okay, I'll do that and I'll do one better. So there's a balance between the two. There's a balance of understanding what your users need, what problems they've got. But there's the other side. You also need to see what's happening in the market and seeing if you can jump ahead of them as well. I'm giving a bit of a confusing message here, but the first thing is, if a competitor comes out with something which becomes table stakes for your industry, then I would say that that's where you need to focus your efforts.
That makes sense. So what about these we'll call them global companies? They're very deeply embedded. They've got their, they're embedded in what people do. And then what is your opinion on them making changes and advances that nobody asked for?
It happens all too often. And
does.
the one is, do they have a foresight that no one else can see? Do they have a vision that, once again, we call bleeding edge? And they're like, okay, this is where we believe the market's going to go, so we're going to invest in that. And I keep going back to the Amazon story because that just sort of came to mind. But they're very much in that space. They were like, okay, here's the vision. No one is really asking for cloud computing, particularly back then, but they built it and they did it. And so they, in those instances, if they have that vision, you work towards it and you build it. But in many cases, companies build things that nobody really wants or needs. And I think in those instances, they just want to say they're innovating for the sake of innovating. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but
Well, no, there could be case made for that, I think, my opinion. One of the things that I always encourage like my companies, the companies I work with to do is to come up with like an idea board, if you will, and have a regular process of reviewing the ideas and seeing which ones are viable, now, never, whatever that's going to be, and then potentially looking at moving that into the innovation space. Is that different than what you're talking about?
No, absolutely. I suppose maybe I should take a step back and with the innovation space, and um, if you have your going back, if you've got your key product, I think there's three spaces you can be in. And the one space is, okay, my existing product, how do I make my existing product better? And you should be working on that. And that's continuous, and that's what you've got to keep going. Then just outside that space is, okay, how do I get this? How do I improve this product significantly for my existing customers? Is the one thing, how I can grow this product. And that might be sort of, a year to 2 years out where you launch that, maybe even 3. And similar to that is, how do I get this product into new markets? And those are the two things that where you can grow that product, innovate in this product so that, more people will get it, or go into new markets with the existing product. And what is beyond that then is sort of what you're alluding to is, okay, what is 4 to 5 to 6 years out, which breaks that whole mold, which is not the existing product. It's not an improvement of this product. It's not this product in a new market. It's almost a new product entirely, because what we see with products is they will start off, they will scale if they do well, then they will start to peak. And then after a while, they will decline. And we can think of a lot of products in the market that have peaked and started to decline. And that's when the startups will come in and replace you, because you've started to hit that decline. So you need to start to look at innovating yourself and trying to then say what is next, so that you are almost like that startup. When you're in that peak phase, you're now building the next product to replace your product that you've got in the market.
Do you think that way? Like you're looking at when you're developing a product or you get a product that's in that MVP space, it's like how much, what is that life cycle going to look like before we need to start, with the next product? Do you think that way, or?
I think in the early days, it's really hard to tell how long a product will last. In fact, it's hard to tell if it's even going to be a success, whether you're just focusing on trying to get it to scale. But if you have a product that is successful and it's in the market and it's doing well, it's important to start to think about what's next, particularly at the moment with AI. What is coming around the corner that's going to start, dare I say, eating your lunch? What's going to start replacing your solutions that are in the market at the moment? And so you should be looking to replace yourself or replace your own products before somebody else comes into the market. And absolutely, that's a vital approach to innovation within large corporations. And they're getting much better at it. I think, if we look back 10, 15 years ago, this wasn't a topic that was covered as well. But nowadays, you can see these large organizations are much better at thinking about this, whether they're, and many of them are better at doing it as well, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. I tend to think from the perspectives of how long would it take for someone else to replicate what I'm doing, or what's being done. It's like, okay, we have a year one runway, we've got a 2-year runway. Well, I'll guess, obviously, but it's like, let's think in terms of those iterative adjustments, innovations that we can make so that we're a moving target. It makes it harder for, it makes it harder to be competed directly with, at least.
Yeah, I think, as I say, with AI, it's very difficult to tell what's going to happen moving forward, because things can happen so quickly now. But
Yeah.
historically speaking, we all think of these startups that have come in and just suddenly replaced a business. But many of them have actually been going for 3 or 4 years before they replace them. And they seem to have just come out of nowhere. Netflix is an example. oh, Netflix has just arrived. Actually, they were going for many years before they really hit the mark and became who they are today. And really interesting, even with AI, we talk about the fastest growing products are in the market through AI, but the companies behind those have actually been going a long time, a relatively long time. So the products they've built have just shot off and really, are the fastest growing products in history. But the businesses behind them have, in many cases, been going for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I was working with a company back when it was called machine learning, and they're coming up with they were working on an inventory management solution for uh, shopkeepers or something like that, and it was really brilliant, and it was before ChatGPT and it became mainstream. It's really hard to sell. I got to be honest with you.
That's the bleeding edge example, isn't it? It's the bleeding
Yeah,
edge where, if you put that into the market now, people would understand it. They go, yeah, it's great. We'll take it.
yeah.
They had that problem of being sort of first to market, and they look at it and they go, people are not sure I trust it. But nowadays, it's the second mouse.
Yeah, yeah. They're killing it now. They're absolutely killing it now.
Yeah.
What is your favorite thing that you brought to market?
Yeah, it is the one that was most fun, and I've got varied, backgrounds. I've market research. I've been in mobile technology. But the one that I enjoyed the most, probably the most fun product was called Style on Screen. And at the time, I was building a social media monitoring tool. And while I was doing that, I saw people tweeting celebrities on TV shows, or they're watching a TV show and they're tweeting them and saying, love that dress. Where did you get it? And of course, the celebrity is not going to respond. And for me, I said, well, that's a massive opportunity where, people have this need. They want this answer. And so we built a chatbot, really. And this is before people were calling it sort of chatbots, that would take that request, would find the item, and it would respond to the person asking the question with a link to where they could buy it, and also often a look for less, as we call it. This is one Dolce Gabbana, but here's the cheaper one from this brand, which is more. And that was a brilliant product. So much fun to work on. Used machine learning, as you say, and so yeah, brilliant fun.
That's fun. That's fun. That's cool. That's cool. That's cool. Anything you want to leave our audience with?
I think really, as the topic is fail fast and just persevere. If you have that vision and you truly believe in it, push ahead. There are the success leaves clues. It's one of the things I say. Success leaves clues. Keep pushing. The other big message I say is assumptions are very important. You have to assume the vision, but don't take those assumptions as facts. Don't fall into the assumption trap. Don't assume everything. So you make assumptions, test them, and that's where you learn to fail fast. So this is my target market. Test that target market. This is the problem they got. Test that. Start with that process, step by step. And if you fail at that point, you haven't put too much into it. You haven't lost, your mojo. You can keep pushing towards that vision and go for it. So that's really what I was saying. And it's the most incredible experience building something innovative. So anybody who has an idea, I truly wish them luck and hope it works out.
Fantastic. And your book, we almost forgot to talk about your book. Do you want to give us a quick rundown on that and where we can get it?
Yep. Well, it's on Amazon, the SALT test. So please hop on to Amazon. If you have an idea and you want to take it to scale, this would be a guide. And I've had so many people who've given me feedback, telling them that it's helped them on their journey. And there's no better feeling than that when somebody gives you that feedback. And, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. I always respond and appreciate engaging with people. So thank you.
Fantastic. Kings, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
No, I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Rick. Thank you.
Absolutely. Folks, thanks you so much for watching or listening to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. We'll catch you next time.